Bad Boys Ride or Die, directed by Adil and Bilall, stars Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. After their late former captain is framed, Lowry and Burnett try to clear his name, only to end up on the run themselves. Bad Boys is a franchise I'm kinda late to. I had really only seen the first movie once a good while ago, and up until a few weeks ago, I took it upon myself to watch the other movies in preparation for this movie. I wouldn't call this a franchise I'm really in love with. I don't think they're particularly great movies, especially the first outing from Adil and Bilall. I thought so far the third movie is definitely the worst of the franchise. The main problem I had with that movie was how it felt like it was going through an identity crisis. It felt like it was trying too much to emulate the quote-unquote style of a Michael Bay movie. I never thought I'd see the day where we would have filmmakers that would be inspired by a director like Michael Bay, but here we are. So naturally, after watching that one, I was very wary walking into this installment of the franchise. Many people are going to go into this movie knowing that it's Will Smith basically back on the big screen since the infamous slap incident at the Oscars, so you would expect this to be a big comeback movie for him and reignite him as the movie star he is. Well, without delving too deep into spoilers, I'll try to explain how that isn't exactly the case. While he does have his moments and does his usual Will Smith shtick, there are other points in the movie where it felt like his character wasn't to an extent treated like a joke, but it almost feels like a reflection of what happened in real life. They've made Larry's character more vulnerable, which for the sake of plot will end up causing some frustrating moments where Larry could kill someone and it doesn't end up happening. However, despite this, his chemistry with Martin Lawrence is as strong as ever. They blend off each other really well, and through their performances they do a good job of conveying how long these two have been in each other's lives. Surprisingly enough, Martin Lawrence seems to be more of a scene stealer than ever. They take his character in an interesting direction without giving specific details away. They make his character less fearless and put him into more action, and sometimes I'm watching it thinking it's a little unbelievable, especially at the age his character is supposed to be at the time the film is set in, but for what they're doing it works at other times. Well, personally, I've seen myself silently giggling one or two times at his comedic moments. I think depending on the person, a lot more people are going to enjoy his humor, and it's not down to the writing, it's all in his performance and how he delivers his lines, which basically goes for any movie he's been in. Joe Pantoliano is back for brief scenes in this movie, and many people might be confused by this if they had seen the previous movie, because spoilers for Bad Boys for Life, his character is killed in that movie. But the way they were able to excuse this is by having him come back in spirit through videos his character made before his death, going so far as for him to literally say the line, "If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead." But it was cool to see him here for the brief screen time he had. This movie basically tries to emulate the coke-filled energy Bad Boys 2 through its filmmaking, especially in the cinematography. There's a good few short little long takes here and there. There's a very creative action sequence near the end where a rig is attached to Will Smith and it spins around to make it look like a first-person shooter and will spin around again. There's behind the scenes footage of this effect being done, and I do find it really impressive the fact that Will Smith is basically controlling this rig all on his own. He has to control it while acting and while mentally not looking at the lens, which is about 2 inches from his face. Near the beginning of this movie there's a really jarring sequence that I can only describe as a trippy, surrealistic scene, and I didn't know what to make of it. I went to see this movie with a bunch of my buddies, and we turned to each other laughing, thinking, what the fuck are we watching right now? While admittedly some of the way these shots were set up looked cool, it just didn't fit in a movie like this. The story in this movie isn't very good. Like I said, the first half of this movie has a lot of weird, trippy imagery that's really weird and out of place. Another thing that annoyed me when the movie started is that the first half of this movie is basically a retread of the previous one, but it's the inverse of what happens in that movie. I found this to be pretty lazy, and it didn't set my hopes very high for the rest of the movie. However, as it went on, I will admit it did get a bit better and had its more ridiculous moments scattered throughout, which is what the franchise is known to do. One moment I found to be pretty entertaining was a moment they do with the character Reggie. What started off as a one-off joke character from Bad Boys 2 as a singular moment here, which is really cool to watch. The final act of this movie is probably where the whole thing peaks. We have a fairly entertaining action sequence with a unique setting, and it's really cool to watch. I'll admit I think some of the camera work during this and other action sequences do get a bit annoying to look look at. The directors of this movie seem to have an overly stylistic problem with the two of the movies I watched from them. Despite these moments, this whole segment of the film was pretty entertaining all the same. Another thing that annoyed me about the action is something that was carried over from the last movie, and that was the overabundance of CGI blood. CGI blood is something I always frown upon in movies. I've yet to see it look good, and I always think practical blood and gore effects look better in films, but they use CGI blood here and it gets pretty annoying to see. Overall, for what this franchise is, it's a decent entry into it. I wouldn't say it lives up to the first movie by any means, but it's certainly better than the previous outings we've seen from Bad Boys. Depending on how well this movie does at the box office, I have a sneaky feeling it won't be the last time we'll be seeing a new Bad Boys movie. But we'll have to wait and see, as at the same time, I do think this movie feels pretty final. You could end the franchise here and I don't think anyone would have an issue with it. It's not a great movie by any means, like I said. The story isn't great and the humor is very unbalanced. Some jokes work and some don't, but that's usually the course with any comedic movie. I'm giving Bad Boys Ride or Die 3 stars. It's not terrible, but it isn't great either. It's the typical big budget action blockbuster you've come to expect from summer releases, and while it's not amazing, it does its job at being just that. There's a lot of very mind-boggling moments that set the world into hyper-realism, but when these goofy moments happen, it can be pretty camp and acts as a fun time. So while the story isn't great, there's a good few action set pieces that will keep many audiences entertained. Also, they fucked up the titles of these movies, alright? They really missed the mark on not calling this movie Bad Boys for Life.